I didn't think it would matter that we hadn't had kids yet. When Eric and I got married, we were in our early 30s. He was steady, kind, the kind of man who held your hand during bad news and made you laugh when the coffee pot overflowed. I loved him for how calm he made the world feel. Like everything might actually turn out okay if we just tried hard enough. But his mother, June, had other plans. From the moment she met me, I could feel the subtle tension. It was the kind of polite coldness women are experts at. Never rude, but never warm either. She'd squeeze my shoulder and say things like, "You'll make a great mom someday," in that tone that sounded more like a warning than a compliment. We didn't live with her, thank God, but we saw her every Sunday for dinner. Pot roast, green beans, and questions. Always the same ones. "Any news yet?" she'd ask, refilling my tea before I could answer. "Your cousin just had her second." I'd smile. "Lieutenant, we're just not rushing it." The truth? We'd been trying for almost 2 years. Doctors, tests, hope, then grief. Again and again. My body was a battlefield I didn't want to talk about. I hated how every cycle felt like a personal failure. How every commercial with a baby in it made me flinch. I'd cry in the shower and come out smiling, just to keep Eric from carrying my sadness too. He was supportive, at first. But over time, I saw it wear on him. He'd avoid making plans for holidays. He stopped bringing up names we used to laugh about. The baby ones we'd picked out in bed, dreaming about a life we thought was certain. Then one night, after another round of silent dinner with his mother, he said something I'll never forget. "I think we should just take a break from trying. Maybe it's not meant to be." He said it gently, but it still felt like a cut. I didn't know that conversation was the beginning of the unraveling. The next Sunday, June cornered me in the kitchen while the guys were watching football. "You know," she said, drying a dish that didn't need drying, "Eric always wanted a big family. It's all he ever talked about growing up." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She leaned in. "I just hope you're not holding him back from what he deserves." It wasn't even subtle anymore. I told Eric about it that night, expecting him to be furious, to defend me, but he just looked tired. "She's old-fashioned," he said. "Don't take it personally." But I did. Of course I did, because I wasn't just failing to give her a grandchild. I was slowly becoming the wrong kind of woman in her eyes. And then came the moment I'll never forget. I came home early from work one Thursday. The house was quiet. Eric was on the phone in the living room. He didn't hear me come in. "I just don't know how to tell her," he said. "She's going to be crushed." A pause. Then, "I know she can't have kids. That's the problem." I stood there, keys still in my hand, and realized he wasn't talking about me like a wife. He was talking about me like a mistake. I didn't say anything that night. I just walked back out the door, sat in the car, and stared at the steering wheel for 20 minutes. My hands shook, but not from anger, from knowing something I could never unknow again. He had already decided. It wasn't just the sentence, "She can't have kids." It was the tone, like I was a house he regretted buying, a plan that didn't pan out, a story he wanted to rewrite without me in it. When I came back in, I pretended nothing had happened. We ate leftover pasta. He told me about work like nothing was wrong. I nodded in all the right places, smiled when he made a joke, and went to bed early with a headache I didn't have. Because if I said what I knew, it would become real. And I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. But the shift had already begun. He stopped calling me babe. He started going to the gym more often, Even on Sundays, his phone lived in his pocket instead of on the kitchen counter. And I started noticing the space between us growing larger than the king-size bed we shared. June didn't bother hiding her satisfaction. She brought up adoption over dinner. Not in a supportive way, but in a clearly this is your last option way. She started tagging Eric in Facebook posts about cousins having babies. At one point, she even said, "You know, there are women who'll carry for others now. Some girls just rent out their wombs." Like I was a broken appliance they were thinking about replacing. I told Eric how it made me feel. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "She doesn't mean anything by it." That was the problem. She meant everything by it. One night, I found a pamphlet in his glove box for a fertility clinic out of state. A new one. One I'd never heard of, and one he never told me about. It was tucked under his registration papers like a secret he didn't know how to throw away. When I asked him about it, he said, "It's just something Mom gave me. She knows someone who had success there." I stared at him for a long time. "Why didn't you give it to me?" He shrugged. "I didn't think you were ready." That was the moment I realized we were done pretending this was mutual. He wasn't asking me what I wanted anymore. He was consulting me. The way you inform a tenant that the lease is almost up. I wasn't a wife. I was a placeholder. A pause in the life he wanted to live with someone more fertile, more compliant, more aligned with June's idea of a real woman. The house began to feel colder, the dinners quieter, the space around me sharper, like everything was being edged with glass. And still, I stayed. Because love, even when it's dying, leaves behind hope like crumbs. And I kept following those crumbs, right into the dark. It was a Tuesday afternoon when June showed up at the house unannounced. I had just gotten home from the grocery store. Half a gallon of milk, a frozen lasagna, the kind of things you buy when no one cooks together anymore. She was sitting on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway, legs crossed neatly, a Tupperware of banana bread on her lap. I knew that banana bread. It was the kind she made when she wanted something. I didn't invite her in. She came anyway. The conversation was casual at first. She complimented the hydrangeas, commented on the weather, asked if Eric had told me about the new position opening at his job, as if we were still in the kind of marriage where we shared things. Then she folded her hands and said, "Ashley, you know I've always tried to be respectful." That was how I knew something awful was coming. She continued, "But it's been 5 years. I think we both know where this is headed." I blinked. "Where what is headed?" She sighed, like it physically pained her to explain. "You can't give him what he needs, and the longer you hold on to this, the more damage you're doing. To him, to yourself, to our family." I stared at her. "You think I'm the one doing damage?" "I think you're delaying the inevitable. You had your time, but Eric needs a family, a real one." It hit me like a slap, and not because of the words, but because I realized Eric must have let her say them. He must have agreed. He may not have had the courage to tell me himself, but he didn't stop her from doing it, and that made it worse. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just said, "Get out of my house." She looked surprised, like she expected tears, maybe a plea, but not that. "This was never your house," she said, and in that moment, I knew it. She'd never seen me as family, just a phase, a placeholder, a defective product that came with a return receipt. That night, Eric didn't come home until after midnight. No apology, no mention of what happened. Just a, "Hey," and a soft thud of keys on the counter. I didn't ask where he'd been. I was done asking. I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I was empty, but not broken. There's a difference. The next day, I packed a bag. Not because I was ready to leave, but because I wanted to see if he'd stop me. He didn't. He just looked at the suitcase, nodded slightly, and asked, "Do you want me to call someone to help you carry it?" That's when I realized I hadn't lost my marriage that day. I'd lost it months ago, and now I was just the one brave enough to say it out loud. I didn't go far. A friend from work had a pull-out couch and a soft heart, and that was enough. I spent the first few nights just trying to remember how to breathe in a space where no one waited to be disappointed by me. People say grief feels like a wave, but for me, it was a silence. Like everything in my body had gone dim. No more checking my temperature every morning. No more vitamins lined up like soldiers. No more hope disguised as spreadsheets of ovulation windows. I was free, in a strange way. But freedom is lonely when it comes from being discarded. 2 weeks passed, then 3. No texts, no calls. Eric didn't come looking. June didn't either. They didn't want me back. They wanted me gone. And they got exactly what they wanted. But here's what they never knew. I could have had children. I found out 6 months before I left. A new OB/GYN, new tests, a small correctable issue with my thyroid. 1 round of medication, and things might have changed. It wasn't some miracle cure, but it was hope. Real, medical hope. And I told no one. Not because I wanted to punish Eric. Not because I wanted to hold it over him like a weapon. But because, somewhere deep inside, I knew. He didn't deserve to be the father of my children. I didn't want my body to carry life for someone who'd already decided I was a failure. I didn't want to raise a child in a house where love came with deadlines and conditions. I didn't want June to ever hold my baby in her arms and say, "Finally, something good came from her." So I kept it. My body, my choice. My truth, mine alone. Sometimes power isn't loud. It's not in slamming doors or revenge speeches. Sometimes it's in the quiet refusal to explain yourself. I saw them once, months later, at the grocery store. Eric was pushing a cart, June beside him, and a woman I didn't recognize, mid-20s, polished, pretty. She looked like someone who didn't know yet that warmth can be a trap. She was pregnant. I watched from behind a magazine rack as June beamed at her. Her hand rested on the young woman's belly, like it belonged there, like she had won. But I didn't feel defeated. I felt released. They had built their perfect little image again, and I had escaped it. And maybe that was the first time I truly understood. Leaving wasn't the loss. It was the salvation. I didn't move back home. I didn't try to rebuild the life I'd lost. Because the truth was, that life wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it never really was. It was a version of me I'd molded to fit their picture. A quiet wife. A hopeful daughter-in-law. A woman who smiled through needles and tests and baby showers she wasn't invited to. But when you stop pretending, a strange thing happens. You remember who you were before all the shrinking. I started walking again. Not for weight or fertility, just for me. I picked up sketching. Something I hadn't done since college. I started sleeping through the night without that hollow ache in my chest that used to whisper, "You're not enough." And little by little, I began to believe it. I was enough. Just like this. No baby. No husband. No gold stars from a woman who never wanted me in the family photo. I never told Eric about the thyroid diagnosis. Some truths are meant to be held close, like pearls. Not to hide them, but to honor the journey they represent. That diagnosis didn't just say, "You're capable." It said, "You were never the problem." And I needed that more than he ever did. One day, I got a card in the mail. No return address, just 2 words inside. "I'm sorry." No name, but I knew the handwriting. I didn't respond. Because forgiveness isn't always a phone call. Sometimes it's waking up one morning and realizing you don't feel the weight anymore. You don't check your phone hoping for an apology. You don't rehearse conversations in the shower. You just move forward. I'm not angry anymore. Not at him, not at June, not even at the version of me that stayed too long. She was just trying her best with the love she had. But I've grown since then. Now, when people ask if I have children, I just smile and say, "No, but I've survived a